Welcome to another edition of Your New Lens on Life. I wanted to introduce a new little segment looking at toxic leadership. And there are several different types of toxic leaders that create a very negative environment and culture within any organization. And to deal with that and to succeed in those environments, or to even find a path to success in whatever it is you're doing, it's important to recognize that toxicity and to understand that it's not always you and it's not always your fault. And so I wanted to look at this and try to give some pointers and some help to dissect that for your lives personally. The first type of toxic leader that I want to look at, and this one overlaps not only within leadership, within organizations, but especially within life and other relationships as well, and that's the narcissist. Now, to recognize a potential narcissist, you look for things like their belief of their self-importance. They have a fantasy that their success and what they do is special, a whole lot more special than what everyone else around them achieves and work towards. They require admiration, and through that and by that, what I mean that they look at ways to say, look what I've done, look what I'm doing, look at me. They find those different ways of bringing the spotlight from any situation or any circumstance onto themselves, as opposed to the other factors or the other players within the situation, within the project, or within whatever it is, whatever you define it in dealing with someone who could potentially be a narcissist. Now, also, they believe that they're entitled, and they expect compliance, automatic compliance from everybody else that's involved with them. They look at things like from the perspective of, why else would you not do what I say? Because what I say, I'm the special one. I'm the one that's always right. This is the path that has to be followed. And so there's that entitlement. And it kind of bleeds back into the other points. The self-importance, the fantasies of success, the belief that they're special, and the admiration, right? So all of these are layered, and they kind of feed off of each other in looking at the narcissistic type of personality. They take advantage of others to achieve their own ends, or to achieve what they're ultimately wanting. Within the workplace, they take advantage of what others are doing or what others have done to achieve their promotion and the look at me. For example, if someone has made a mistake and something bad has happened, or something has happened negative within the workplace, the narcissist will be the first ones to kind of point fingers in that direction, and in doing so, they're achieving their goal of getting a step ahead of that person, and kind of pushing that workplace competition for promotion and recognition to the back a little bit. Right? And the same thing within personal relationships. They take advantage of other people by looking at their weaknesses, and by preying on those weaknesses, they achieve their end of staying within that relationship. And why would a narcissist want to stay in a relationship with someone and force that? Well, because they're really insecure in themselves, and they really know down deep inside that they're a failure, and they need that other person to deflect those failures and incompetencies onto. And so that's important to recognize. They envy others, or they believe others are envious of them. And again, that feeds back into the self-importance, the fantasies of how they're special, their entitlement, all of those other points that I just mentioned. They want to believe that other people are envious and jealous of them, when in reality, most of the time, no one could really care about them just because of all of the other factors. And so when you're looking at this, it's important to understand, right, is that There's not any given list or any given set of, here's a predefined checklist that if you hit X out of 10 of these, you're dealing with a narcissist. Because narcissism is really a personality disorder. It's a mental health issue, right? And outside of that profession of dealing with people with mental health issues, we're not really qualified to really diagnose these things. But these do serve as red flags and warnings that, hey, this could be what you're dealing with. And naturally, the more of these points that are encountered, certainly the clarity of this person being a narcissist comes into view. Now, when you're dealing with narcissism and someone who is a narcissist, there's a few things that you need to do to kind of safeguard yourself and protect yourself from them. First, you need to see them for who they are. Okay? And when I say that, you need to understand that their main objective is to manipulate and to control. And it happens through many different forms and many different ways. One could be playing up to sympathy, right? Trying to make you feel sorry for them and trying to gain that control. And all that is a manipulation. Or it could be on the polar opposite, where they're belittling and they're putting down and making you think that you're so incompetent that you can't be successful or live without being attached to them, right? All those are just different ropes that the narcissist will use to try to keep you entangled in their web of deceit. So you need to keep in mind that they are who they are. Manipulators, liars, people that can't be trusted, people that are going to abuse and take advantage. And when you do, it kind of puts the other steps of safeguarding yourself from them in a easier position, let's say. The second step, stop focusing on them. Stop putting all of your energy on the narcissist. You have to have some me time. You have to set up some time for you to be able to look at life and take that breather to clear your thoughts, to clear your head, and to wrap your mind around what you're having to cope with and deal with, so that you have a clarity of what steps you need to take to deal with the situation, because you need to deal with the situation. And this is true whether it's in a place of employment or whether it's in a personal relationship, right? The steps are the same. It's you have to have clarity of thought to remember and to keep in front of you who you're dealing with. You're dealing with a manipulative liar who has some reason that they need to keep you entangled into their life. A third is you need to speak up for yourself. And when you're speaking up for yourself, you're addressing the narcissist. You need to set specific boundaries. You need to set clear expectations. And you need to be consistent in that message. Just like dealing with a toddler, dealing with the terrible twos, or dealing with something of that nature, you have to be consistent. Your yeses have to be yes, and your no's have to be no's without repentance. Meaning that regardless of what happens, if you have said yes or if you have said a no, that you stick to that. And you have to be consistent in that and in what you're saying. You can't tell them and set a boundary one way one day and experience some of the manipulation, because you're going to experience some of the manipulation, and then kind of change that stance the next day or the next week, right? When you do that, the narcissist sees that you are giving up ground and you're making concession and accommodation for them. And when they see that, they recognize that they still have that power and that control over you. And you need to think about that one very carefully. Within defining that and within defining those specifics, you're two key things that you're going to establish. One, you're going to establish of what's acceptable. What's an acceptable expectation of behavior, of interaction, etc., of how you're dealing and interacting with that person. And the second is how you want to be treated, right? Because how you have been treated by the narcissist is not acceptable, or you wouldn't be having the issues that you're having now. And so you need to clearly define that. And again, you need to be specific. You need to be clear, and you have to be consistent. So before you even address this third point about speaking up for yourself, you need to define that for yourself. And you have to know what those answers are for yourself before you have that conversation. Or that entire conversation is going to be controlled, manipulated, and it's going to be a lost battle. And the only way that you can answer those for yourself is you're going back to step 2 and focusing more on you than you are them. They are okay. They are big boys and girls. They can take care of themselves. Focus on you. Have some me time to where you can clear the head and you can think through those answers. What's acceptable to you and how do you want to be treated? The fourth, you need to set boundaries. And you need to carry them out. If in a relationship, if you lay out the boundary, and this goes back to answering the questions on that third point. If you set the boundary of, I do not want X, Y, and Z to happen, that is unacceptable. If that happens, this is the consequence. Remember, being clear, consistent, following through, specific. This is what will happen if you do X, Y, and Z. And you have to stick to that. When X, Y, and Z happens, you need to be prepared to take those steps and follow through with it. That is stripping the control from the narcissist and putting it back into your hands where it belongs. It doesn't belong anywhere else but in your hands. The fifth, expect pushback. So when you're ready to go through and follow through with the consequence of them doing X, Y, and Z, because they are going to do that. Just like dealing with the toddler, you say, don't put your hands in that cookie jar, don't eat those cookies, or this is going to happen. They're going to still try to reach that to see if you're going to really follow through with popping the hand or with putting them in the corner or whatever the consequence is, right? And so that's what the narcissist is going to do. They're going to push it and see what they can get away with within those boundaries. It's them trying to define the points of authority that they still have within this. They're testing you to see if you're going to still follow through with what you say and if you're going to stick to it, or if you're just all hot air and you're ultimately going to give in. But you have to stand your ground on that. Another thing, another manipulation that the narcissist will do is that they will try to shift blame. Earlier I had mentioned about how if something bad in the workplace happens and the narcissist is quickly the one to point the fingers, they want everyone else to be at fault and see every problem to be someone else's fault except for their own. They don't want anything to land within their lap. They don't want to take that ownership. They want to do that because if they do, if there is a weak, so back up for a second. So if a mistake happens, then that means that someone made a bad decision or made the wrong decision or did something bad. Well, doing something bad, making the wrong decision denotes weakness. Well, if you are seen as weak, well, then you're not as important in society as you would be if you were strong, right? You've got to connect these dots to just very minutely begin to understand the thought process and the thought patterns of the narcissist. And so if all of that weakness is then embedded, well, then right there goes their self-importance. Right there goes the fantasies of their self-perceived success. And right there goes all of those things that make a narcissist begin to unravel at that point, right? And so they're not going to take responsibility for anything that goes wrong. The seventh thing, so it's important, before I go to 7, it's important that you understand that even though they are deflecting blame back on you, well, if you had done this, I wouldn't have done that. Well, if you had done this, I wouldn't have done that. You know, there's all those ifs, and it always begins with if you had done something first, right? That's all that deflection. And you've got to recognize and you've got to see that pattern in that language that they give when you're dealing with these issues and dealing with a narcissist. And I say dealing with because ultimately you're never going to be able to fix a narcissist because, again, it is a mental health personality disorder, and unless you're a professional, you're not equipped to fix it, right? And so it's not your fault. And that goes into the 7th point is you need to find support. You need to hear from other people, and you need to rely on some of the strengths from other people to go through those first 6 steps. Because if all you hear is that it's your fault, you're a failure, you're this, you're that, and that's the only message that you're hearing, then that's going to be the only message you believe, whether it's right or wrong. A liar can tell a lie so long that he believes that it's the gospel truth, but it still doesn't make it right. It's just all that he hears, and it's all that the liar hears, so it's all the truth that the liar knows. And so in finding support and creating that support around you, you're hearing a different message. And it's giving you more data for your mind to process, because you can now process what you're hearing from the support group, and you can process what you're hearing from the narcissist, right? And it helps you to get that footing, to be able to take that stand, to be specific, to be consistent, and to be clear in what you're going to do to deal with that narcissist. The 8th point, just a couple more. Insist on immediate action. Promises are worthless. And again, we go back to one of the natures of a narcissist is that they are liars, period. If they were honest, they would be honest enough to know that their self-importance is just a lot of hot air. They would be honest enough to know that their fantasies of success is polar opposite of what reality truly is. And so honesty is not part of the picture or even the equation for the narcissist. And you have to draw that line and say, okay, your words are meaningless because you by nature are a liar. You know, that goes back to the very first point, is seeing them for who they are. You got to be honest on that level. A liar. And because I know that you lie, the only thing that I'm going to believe is your action. You take the action, and then I can start believing. Not believing what they say, but you're believing what you see, right? And if there's any hope of repairing that relationship, whether it's, and again, it's either in the workforce, within the organization, or within a relationship, if any of that trust is going, if that relationship is going to be salvaged, that trust has to be rebuilt. And action is the only way, the only language, the only currency in this that will repair that. Number 9, they need professional help. Again, it goes back to the fact that narcissism is a mental personality disorder, right? And it's just like dealing with depression or any of the others. It doesn't make the person a bad person just because they have this issue. What makes them the bad person is when they refuse to address and they refuse to get the help needed to overcome this in life. That's the defining moment. That's what makes the difference between making them a recovering good person versus being a habitually bad person, right? And it comes down to whether or not they're willing to get the help. And if they're in denial that they need help, and if they're in denial that there's even a problem, then right there, that's the defining moment where you need to decide to be able to go and to end it, because it's not worth it. The 10th part is recognize when you need help. And if at any point through these steps of working through the relationship and dealing with a narcissist, if you are struggling at, well, perhaps it is my fault, or you struggle with, well, everyone around me is just saying that that this other person is wrong and that they shouldn't be doing me this way. And again, you're deflecting responsibility and ownership of all of this. That's another red flag that you need to recognize that you need help in this. If there's resistance with any of those other 9 points internally and you're struggling with that, you need to reach out and you need to get help as well. Just like there's support groups for people dealing with addicts and dealing with family members that have, severe mental health issues and things like that. There's support groups for all types of stuff, not just for the person going through it, but also for the family members as well. When you see those, you need to reach out to someone like that can help you as well, because you need help to cope through and to get through this situation and to get the healing and the recovery that you need. Now, from an organizational standpoint, if you are in a decision-making capacity within your organization, you need to take a serious look at the leadership within your organization, and you need to ask that hard question: am I hiring and am I promoting and supporting toxic leaders? I can go down a list now of 5 or 6 toxic leaders I've dealt with throughout my career, and it's not uncommon to experience all of this, especially within any bigger corporation. It becomes even more prevalent. So how do you do that? Well, you go through screening process. There's different types of tests that can be taken at the point of hiring or at the point of promotion to get a feel for the type of personality and to measure that personality of the individual or the candidate that you're considering. A lot of times those tools are not used, but they should be. And it would help strengthen a lot of organizations if they had weeded through the leadership, or even if they were to weed through the leadership now. It would only strengthen them and better that position. It might hurt a few feelings, but which is more important within a corporation or within any organization? Hurt feelings or the success of the organization? Another way to look at this and deal with a toxic leader in terms of narcissism within an organization would be to not just have a short 1-year probationary period within that leadership role, but extend that. The first year or the probationary period, whether it's 90-day or first year, whatever that is, it's always the honeymoon period and everyone is in love with everyone else. But if you were to extend beyond that, then that honeymoon period is over and now you're starting to see the leader for what he or she really is, a little bit clearer. Another tactic that could be used, or another way to try to avoid a narcissist in leadership within your organization, is to work with executive coaches and allow them to have the ability to candidly report back to upper management what they're observing from that leader. And by doing so, these traits that I listed at the beginning, the self-importance, the fantasies, and on and on and on, those can be recognized through that coach working with that new leader, and those things can be identified. And upper management at that point can then decide, okay, do we use the coach to help coach them off of this path and this way of thinking, or do we cut the ties, right? You have the power of that decision. But if you never go down the road to work with that and to identify it, you as the decision maker do not have the power over that decision and to be able to do it. It's been taken out of your hands. Those are some of the ways to think about and to look at that. And within a personal relationship, it's important that you identify one or two people that you can really trust to talk about these things to help guide you through this. And if you sincerely believe that you're working with a narcissist within whatever capacity in a relationship, you really need to talk to someone on a professional level to get guidance for taking the right steps through this. And as you address it, watch those red flags, and if they continue and the path of denial still exists, then you really should evaluate what is the best route to exit this situation. And the same goes within the workplace. If you're dealing with a toxic leader who is a narcissist, and if there's not a way for you to talk about this without repercussions within your organization, then you need to find a way to cope with it until you can find a better position to go to or a better organization to go to. But job searching definitely should be at the top of the list for you if that is the case. Well, that's all for this time. I gave you a lot to think about and a lot to go over, and I hope that you do, because it's really good information. And then next time we'll look at another type of toxic leader and see what that looks like. Have a good one. And don't forget to click subscribe, to click follow, click like, and to share these videos and to help me grow this YouTube channel, Your New Lens on Life. Until next time.